Good evening, friends. Welcome to Supernatural Files. File 86. On February 12, 2013, in the Meijiang scenic area of Tianjin, patrol officers discovered a young woman standing by a tree and a man lying on the ground. The man was already dead when they found him. The authorities arrested the young woman. The woman claimed her name was Zhang. Born in the 11th year of the Republic of China, she said she was 92 years old, but she looked like she was only 20. The authorities thought she might have a mental illness, but what she said was very sincere. She said the man's name was Sun Jun, born in 1979. They met at a water and land ritual. Sun Jun was a handsome guy, and he had a sweet talk, so she fell for him. After dating for a while, she found out that Sun Jun had another woman, and she was his childhood sweetheart. Zhang was very angry. Unexpectedly, he came to her in a dream and said he was in big trouble. 4 cultivators had destroyed his cultivation and killed his entire family. He was powerless to get revenge, so he could only turn to her for help. Zhang hurried back to the capital that day. She and Sun Jun went to get revenge, one by one. She found out that these people were all enlightened masters. Sun Jun had indeed been practicing harmful cultivation, so the masters were doing the right thing. But Sun Jun swore his loyalty. He promised her that if she helped him this time, he would be devoted to her from now on. So Zhang hardened her heart and went on a killing spree. First, she found someone named Cheng Derui. He specialized in cultivating internal elixirs and the great Buddha's hand seal, so she used a special technique to contaminate his elixir, causing him to be fatally poisoned. Then, she used Samadhi true fire to destroy his hand seal. The man died from the poisoning. Next, she found a man named Zhang Hai, who practiced the Bardo body. She used a soul-shifting technique. With 10 paper figurines as a diversion, she sucked all of Zhang Hai's souls into them. The souls were constantly shifted between the paper figurines and never came out again. Finally, she found a couple named Hao, Songhan, and Jin Lingling. They practiced dual cultivation. One was good at chanting spells, and the other was good at summoning heavenly lightning. She used half of her cultivation to create a heavenly lightning barrier, and then released an inner elixir. She killed both of them in one go. She had finally avenged Sun Jun. Then, Sun Jun asked her to revive his family. She spent 30 years of her cultivation to revive all 12 members of his family. But right at that moment, Sun said, "Revive one more person, and my great task will be complete." She asked who it was. Sun said it was his ex-girlfriend. Zhang was furious. She said, "Since you still think of her, then I will grant your wish. But sadly, she can't be revived." Sun immediately asked, "What do you mean?" She replied, "You were killed by those 3 people a long time ago. I was the one who extended your life after I came back. Since you love her, you'll die with him." Sun immediately fell to the ground, dead. The people involved laughed uncontrollably. They asked a psychiatrist to help with the evaluation, but in the blink of an eye, Liu Zhang disappeared from the detention center. They investigated again, and those 3 people did exist. But he died of a fish, all from ordinary food poisoning, surgical accidents, and strokes. But the autopsy revealed that Xiao Jun had been dead for over half a year. But in that half year, he had been working and active as usual. So, this case became very confusing. There was nothing they could do, so it was eventually classified as a cold case. File 85. 2012. Dongshan Village, Jixian, Tianjin. An unexplainable event happened, and one 8-year-old girl named Wang Chengxi was found by the river. She was in shock. After resuscitation, she recovered. When she woke up, she said something strange. There was nothing on her forehead before, but there was a big cinnabar mole. The staff asked about her identity and what happened, but they got a strange answer. She said her father sent her to this mountain village. Their family originally lived on Nancy Food Street. Her father and mother both ran a restaurant. Her parents told her they would pick her up in a month. She didn't want to go, but her parents forced her, so she had to obey. But after she got there, strange things started to happen. Her great-uncle didn't look like anyone in her family, and this mountain village was in a remote area, with no roads, no water, and no electricity. Her great-uncle's house was on the mountainside. It was a big mansion, but she couldn't see any villagers outside. The servants in the house were very quiet. Besides her, there were more than 20 other girls who also lived in this big mansion. Every time after dinner, all the girls would feel dizzy and sleepy, then pass out. And after they woke up, their lower bodies would feel very painful, but no one could remember what happened the night before. Wang Chengxi almost never ate the food from the mansion, and she was very alert when she slept, so she could always hear strange things at night. She once tried to leave secretly, but she couldn't find the way back. Once she tried to escape, her great-uncle chased her from behind. She had to jump into the river and run. When she woke up, she found herself in the hospital. After listening to these conversations, the authorities started to question the Jixian branch. The branch replied that they had never heard of this village. The local villagers had never heard of it either. Then, the staff started to investigate the girl's father. But everything was normal. There were no bad records. But they denied it. Denied they'd been to that village. But they found out their house was in the Chentazi drainage river. They did have a lot of property. When investigators got to Chentazi, they found it was very desolate. At the end of the road, there was a small village. It was almost all a lake. After the village, it became even stranger. They found there were many boys and girls around 7 years old living there. And there were a lot of infants. When they investigated the identities of these boys and girls, they found they weren't from the area. They all dropped out of high school or vocational school, and their parents sent them here. But the problem was, their children were already 7 years old, but their speech was exactly like the Jixian accent. After questioning a few of the children, they found that almost none of the children had their parents' last names. The relevant personnel, we started investigating the marriage certificates of these boys and girls, and the children's birth certificates, but the local sub-bureau simply ignored them. Finally, the investigators went to the building bureau themselves to review the documents. They found that the administrative level of this place wasn't a village. It was a commercial plot of land. As early as 1999, it was contracted by a developer. At that time, they wanted to build a bunch of buildings. But 2 years later, the developer, for some reason, transported some bricks and old wood and built a small mountain village. What was even stranger was there were no power lines, no plumbing, and only one well dug at the village entrance. Later, there were some other things. One of the developer's daughters also lived here. She also gave birth to a child who spoke the Jixian dialect, a little girl. About a week later, they never heard from them again. One afternoon, the relevant department received a call. Wang Chengxi called to say he was trapped in that village again, and to come rescue him. Then he hung up. The relevant personnel decided to find out what was going on. Finally, in the official archives of the Military Transportation Academy, they found that 45 years ago, when they were building a road in Jixian, they did come across a village like this. The village's name was Shijing Village. But now, Jixian Shijing Village has become a wasteland, and there's a dry well. This place clearly has signs of being man-made, but there are no houses or people. Wang Chengxi's family didn't cooperate with the investigation. They only said he went to a relative's house alone. The relevant personnel began to threaten them, to get them to tell the truth. The family only said they would tell them the truth in one day. The next day, the family said he was staying at Chentaizi and everything was normal. When the relevant personnel arrived, they did find Wang living in a dilapidated brick house, but he was blank-faced and didn't know anything. A person claiming to be his boyfriend said, "Wang," and he had been living here. Relevant personnel, please do not harass. Relevant personnel found Wang Chungsis. Red mole on her forehead was gone, and she was already pregnant. Besides this, there were no other clues. In the back, regarding the investigation of Shijing village, the last record says, after the military engineers entered the village, they wanted to destroy the cemetery to build a road. They found that the locals had weapons and had built structures and a dirt wall. Negotiations failed. A conflict broke out between the two sides. Later, the soldiers and engineers were infected with a disease. After that, they withdrew from the village. Then, a demolition team was dispatched to Shijing village. Ever since then, this village has disappeared. File 83. On November 15, 1992, the authorities received a report that someone on the coast of Tenggu found a traveler on the brink of death. When he was found, he was in a deep coma. After he woke up, the authorities asked about his identity and the cause of the disaster. They got a shocking answer. This person's name is Song Wenchao. He lives in Shanyang, Shanxi. He thought he had been in Shaanxi because a week ago, he was also exploring in the Qinling Mountains with his teammates. They were exploring in an unknown mountain when they suddenly encountered a huge fog and were completely trapped in the mountains. Then, at this time, a group of strangers suddenly appeared. All of them were wearing old military uniforms. They were covered in mud. Their hair and beards were very long. It seemed they had been trekking in the mountains for several weeks. This group of people started asking them for water and medicine. At first, they gave them some, but then they stopped giving it to them. When they asked about their origin, this group of people did not say a word. And this group of people also asked them what mountain this was. They said, this should be a mountainside of Qinling. As a result, these people were shocked and said, how can this be Qinling? Shouldn't this be the Pamir Plateau? At first, the two groups were still arguing about the terrain. Later, they just started attacking each other. When it got dark, they barely spoke anymore. But unexpectedly, during the night's camping, this group of people rushed into their tent and tied all of them up. Next, they took all the water and medicine and kidnapped Song Wenchao. They would release Song Wenchao after one day of walking. But unexpectedly, after this group of people walked for a day, they were still walking in the heavy fog, and then they returned to the campsite. The packages they left behind were still on the ground, but everyone in the tent was gone. As a result, they had to camp here again. Unexpectedly, they went missing again that night. The deputy leader of this group actually shot and killed the leader. He also tied up the others. Then he ran away with the water and medicine. What's more, he stole everyone's bags, and the gold was all spilling out of the bags. At first, everyone was very angry. As a result, a few teammates bit through each other's ropes and started chasing the deputy leader. After 2 days, the fog still hadn't cleared, and no one had any water to drink. They were almost dead. But they discovered they were back where they started. At this point, the fog thinned out. On the mountain path, they saw a building that looked like a cabin. Most of it was buried under mud and sand. The exposed part was very new. When they went in, they found it was a medium-sized fishing boat. There were no bodies inside, and there was a small amount of water and electricity and food, but no one was living in it. Then, something unexpected happened. At first, They felt very dizzy. When they woke up, they realized the boat was floating on the sea. And outside, it was all foggy. Then Song heard a teammate complaining, "We shouldn't have stolen the gold. This is our karma." Then everyone knelt on the ground and cried. When he woke up, he found himself in the hospital. His other teammates' fates were unknown. After the relevant authorities heard this, they didn't think it was a big deal. They just thought Song had a mental illness. And they left that same night. But after the authorities left, Song disappeared from his hospital room. He vanished into thin air. The authorities immediately questioned the other patient in the same room. He said he only heard Song scream in the middle of the night, "I am falling," and then there was no sound. About a year later, his body was found at the bottom of an elevator in a shopping mall in Changsha. The autopsy showed he died from a heavy blow to the head, but inside his work clothes, a plastic bag was found. The bag was full of gold dust. Because this case was unexplainable, and the investigation had no breakthroughs, it was eventually labeled as a cold case.